Okay, can we start? Hi, good evening, everyone, to day 3 of the Youth Majlis here at Davos. I welcome here with me His Highness Prince Sultan bin Khalid Al Saud, the CEO of the Saudi Industrial Development Fund. Since his role in 2023, His Highness chairs a number of the fund's committees, including the Executive Credit and Risk Committees. Your Highness, welcome to Youth Majlis here at Davos. Given your new role as the CEO of SIDF, what is your definition of leadership and how has it shaped you? What helped you reach where you are today?
Sure, thank you, Dalal. I'd also like to start by thanking you all for being here, but also thanking Dr. Badr, everybody at MISC for having me. It's certainly a privilege and an honor. As it relates to definition of leadership, as Dalal was briefing me prior to this session, I was trying to find any saying that I can attribute to Mark Twain. But I'll give you my perspective of it, and I think it has to do much more about creating the conditions to make others successful beyond what they thought was imaginable towards achieving a common goal. For me, that resonates because it requires creating the appropriate culture, empowering others, but giving them the right tools and resources to achieve that success.
Amazing. And how do you do that at SIDF, given your role as a new CEO?
So I think communicating to an individual is very different than communicating to an organization. So two people, you can ask me to do something, I can understand that, hopefully, and try to do what you asked. But for an organization, you do that by creating a platform, incentivizing the right set of behaviors, and penalizing the others. It's about who you hire, who you fire. So it requires a much more differentiated platform of how you communicate, what you do, and the actions you take.
And do you think also being a young leader yourself, that also gives some sort of inspiration to be where you are as well today? Right now in Saudi, we see a lot of young leaders as ministers, as CEOs, and do you think that contributes to helping reach that common goal?
So I think it's a testament of the fundamental belief of the kingdom and the country's vision. So I think across the board, or across the variety of the vision programs, I think there's a clear understanding that it begins with investing in people and ends with creating a better reality for them. And so we see that trust. Young people and young professionals and young leaders are being empowered and are given the opportunity to deliver. And I think that example is set from the top and flows today across every organization, public, private, and non-profit.
Yes. I want to ask Your Highness, if I may, because you started for the past 5 years transitioning from an advisor to a VP and then to a CEO. And of course, you know, you've had relationships with people in the organization as your different roles. How do you manage the relationships now as CEO?
So I think, every new role requires, you're required to grow into it. Nothing comes natural. And I'm like most people, and if you're like most people, the first inclination or the first tendency when you assume a new role or responsibility is to do the things that you know how to do best. And I think with time, you realize that that's not the job, nor the role that you should be fundamentally playing at this stage. So it requires growth. As it relates to people, I think it's very basic, but it's about creating the right conditions for trust. And so I think if people trust you, then they will be, and you're capable of then leading by influence, then they will follow. Make no mistake, because you're their boss. If you ask them to do something, they'll do it because they're paid to do it, right? But that's not leadership. That's authority. And there's a clear distinction between both.
It's interesting that you said trust. So that's, I guess, one of the values of being a leader. What other values do you think a leader should encompass to become a good leader?
Yes, I think the natural one is obviously lead by example. Right? It's not the spoken words, it's the actions. And it requires consistency, it requires you being persistent, and it requires also remaining true to your values and the decisions that you make.
Yes, and going back to what you said about investing in people, would you say that happened to you, that someone invested in you, and that is why you're here today?
Yeah, so I think I own a great deal of gratitude to a lot of people, beginning with my parents, who invested heavily in my education, gave me the opportunity, to my wife, who has been an enormous source of support, but also confidence, towards early on from the start of my career, and I started my career at Aramco as a petroleum engineer. And so at every stage of my career, I owe a great deal to a lot of people who've given me opportunities to learn, to make my own mistakes, and to grow from them.
Amazing. So it starts from your home, really, from your parents, from your family, and then outwards to investing in other people. What advice would you give young leaders today in their new positions if they become new ministers or new CEOs?
So if you don't mind, Dalal, maybe I'll just give it to young people beyond
the
CEOs
beyond
or
becoming
ministers,
leaders, just young people.
because I think it's common, right? I think it's common across the board. I think life is too short. You only get to live once. So I think my advice is don't overthink it. The second piece of advice that I would give is, I think, put yourself out there. Right? Take risks, measurable ones, but situations where we only grow and we only learn from the situations that we feel most uncomfortable in. Right? So find a risk-free space, learn from it, make your mistakes, and if you make them, make sure they're original. Don't repeat somebody else's mistakes. I think that's the...
How many mistakes are you allowed to have as a leader, or even just, as a starting point?
I think
all you can just keep making mistakes.
No, I think all of us are embodiments of our mistakes. You never learn from success, right? You learn from your mistakes. And I think as leaders, to grow organizations, to achieve aspirational goals, you have to leave room for people to make their mistakes. And you have to tolerate it.
Yes. That's actually what we're doing here in Davos, is promoting multi-generational dialogue to really do this, is learn from our older generation's mistakes and not blame them for it. So it's very nice that you mentioned that. I wanted to actually ask, actually before that, His Highness has asked to make half of this session be questions from the audience. He wants it to be an engaging session. He doesn't want it just to be a Meet the Leader session. So after 5 minutes, I might just move to the audience so you can think about a question to ask His Highness. But I wanted to ask in terms of having time, between work and home and family. I see family is very important for you, and as the new responsibilities come across, might be challenging and difficult. And what kind of, how do you manage that, and how do you give advice?
Yeah, so I think it's a difficult balance, and it's always easy to neglect one over the other. But I think, as I said, you live once. And I think priorities matter. Do work, right? Give it 100%. But after you leave the office, leave it there. When you cherish the time that you have with your families, be with them. Body and mind. It's much more about the quality of time spent than the time, because the time is not something that you own for the most part. But my personal priorities, and this is me, it's family, friends, work.
That's very nice. I'll leave it to the audience if you have any questions to His Highness. I see I have a question there. Do we have a mic out?
Thank you so much. Your Highness, I was listening to you, even recording the advices you're making because they're quite valuable. My name is Julia Stark. I'm from Brussels. I'm the president of the European Women Association. And although we are now a global organization, not as active only in Europe, but also starting to entering the Middle East, and we've been to Saudi, and we see a lot of amazing and talented women. So my question to you as a new CEO of as IDF, do you have any, I would say, programs towards empowering women in your organizations? And if so, how do you do that?
No, thank you very much. And maybe I'd just like to recognize what MISC is doing here. I think it's quite refreshing. We talk a lot about ESG, and obviously it's quite important, but there's always a lot of focus on the E. So it's nice to see that everything in the MISC platform here today is about the S. And a key part of that obviously is also empowering the youth, but also women. So I think as leaders, I think it begins with recognizing, a true recognition, right? That women, especially in the workplace and everywhere, have not had their fair share. So it takes first an understanding, but then active interventions. So I think at SIDF in particular, we obviously have a long history in terms of our human capital development, and we usually recruit our recruiting strategies right out of college, and we have 20,000 applicants, we take 25. And it's usually driven by quality. The only constraint that we put in terms of our credit program, the only constraint is that 50% have to be women, 50% have to be female. The second is obviously we have different activations within the organization. So we have an actual formal committee that's established by the CEO, primarily my predecessor, that deals with, so it's a committee that deals with everything that has to do with empowering women within the workplace. But we also have a number of social activations that we run on a regular frequency. But then there's a third part that we do is to make sure that women are getting their fair share. So there's a number of things that we monitor. So any promotions to leadership positions, are there particular biases? We would never accept as an organization, if we have an opening for a leadership position, we hire based on quality, but we would never accept if the candidates that you're interviewing does not have a woman. That just doesn't make sense, right?
So giving equal opportunity.
So ensuring that the equal opportunities do exist across the board, but that requires active intervention. It requires some sort of institutional role, and requires an organization that monitors, thinks about, and ensure that there are no biases and prejudices in the system, even if non-intentional.
It's beautiful to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? We'd like this to be more of an engaging session, so if you do have questions, don't be shy. Okay.
I'll take personal questions as well.
Yeah, His Highness is willing to take personal questions. Okay, maybe I'll start with a personal question, Your Highness. You have kids.
I do.
How do you, how do you mentor your kids?
So I think I do a horrible job at it, but I have three boys.
Hard to believe.
Yeah, I have three boys. And I think I was speaking with Dr. Badr about it, and I think it's also a cultural thing that has grown into Saudi. So I'll tell a story. So I studied for quite a bit of time, both my bachelor's and master's in the US. And during my master's, we used to go a lot of the time to the park. So I had my two young boys. They would go up the tree, and as soon as they go, I would, either myself or their mom would go down, they're afraid of somebody falling or getting hurt. But around us, if we looked at the Americans, the kids were fine, right? And the parents were sitting down. jumping, falling down, and whatsoever. And I think I realized back then, it was quite shocking and telling that with time, I think with different things, we became quite risk averse as a society. But culturally there, America is obviously a competitive environment, right? And so it's natural to let people take more risks. And these things matter, even at an early age. So I think what I try to instill in my children are obviously, hopefully, the good values: integrity, honesty, making sure that they do something worth doing and achieving, but also taking a bit more risk, and for us as parents being a bit more comfortable there. But just building on that question, and we're usually consumed. I think of a lot of individuals, if you have kids or families or whatsoever, most of your thinking, this is, I think, a natural human tendency. Most of your thinking, most of your worries are not about you as an individual, right? It's about those around you and those that you care about. So I think a lot about what are the things that matter, that really, really matter at the end of the day, that I would like to give my kids. And I think there are three things. The first is the best education that I can afford to give them. The second, because it's empowering. The second is I would love to teach them to pursue a passion. The third is great memories. For me, these are things that stay, have a lasting impact, and hopefully, because that's what ultimate success in life is if you actually look back at your life and say, I've had a happy life. So, and I think across these three things, that's what I hope to give my kids.
That's really nice. And do you notice the passion from a young age and then start to invest in it? Is that what you do?
Yeah, so now it's mostly about football. Or if you're America, it's about soccer. So that's the unfortunate reality of the only passion they're pursuing currently.
Do you support the same teams? Because
so we do. I mean, I would like to think of myself as
neutral,
an open father. But the only thing that they don't get a say in is they have to support Al Hilal.
Okay. Yes, it's difficult when.
Doctor.
No, go ahead, Doctor.
I have a question about SIDF.
Yeah.
SIDF, and you have the privilege and also the challenge of leading a very prestigious and traditional organization that has been in the forefront of human capital development in Saudi Arabia. Maybe those who don't know Saudi Arabia, SIDF might be known more for the human capital development arm, more than the industrial funding that they're tasked with doing. My question to you is, going forward, and now that at a certain time, it was the only place that had that prestigious and rigorous financial training. And I remember some of my colleagues who went there, each one who goes there guarantees it's almost like a ticket to going on becoming a CEO of a listed company or a government position at that time. My question is, now that there's many other institutions that offer education and offer these kinds of certificates and programs and so on, like PIF and so on and so on, how do you continue this distinction, and how do you continue to be attractive as opposed to in the past where you were the only entity that had that? Thank you very much.
And now they're competing with MISC, so
that too.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Badr, and I think it's an important question because, as he said, I think even in our main activities, the strongest element that has supported us across generations, whether with leadership, with ministers, to ensure that we continue to fulfill our role of industrializing the kingdom, has been the impression and the perception of everything that we do in terms of human capital development. So it's an important question that goes to the heart of what we do. I think what we've done differently, Doctor, is we first formalized that. That was an informal activity that we undertook because we were established in the 70s. There were no financial professionals in the kingdom. And we had this great relationship with Chase, who basically the fund was built in collaboration with. But I think, Doctor, what we've learned is we focus on two things. Right? We focus first in ensuring that we remain attractive, an attractive recruiting ground. So we want to attract the best. We are never worried about recruiting the best and they leave. We celebrate if they leave, because we embrace it. That's the value proposition. Actually celebrate them if they leave and move on to better opportunities. The worst thing that could happen is if we put shackles on people, and then our intake suffers and they actually stay. So that's the worst thing that could happen to the organization. But in terms of learning, what we've learned, and I mentioned that first part because it's analogous. We're pursuing a similar approach in the training. We invest in people, whether that learning content or learning journey is delivered by SIDF or someone else. So we are tremendously proud at SIDF that we've got one of the many activations that are delivered by MISC is their 2030 leader program, phenomenal program across the kingdom. We are proud at SIDF that at every cohort we've had at least one from one of our employees and leading executives being a member of that program. So I think it's about embracing it. It's about continuing to offer great experiences across the learning journey, but we invest in people. So we give them those opportunities, we celebrate their successes, and that's the commitment we have. So from a first-year employee, no matter what function you work in, to the CEO, our commitment is to growth and learning. So I take courses, every single employee invests in their learning, and it's part of our value system.
That's amazing. So there are no ties. Usually, you invest in the company and you kind of make sure that they stay within the entity a year or two if you've invested in their learning. So this is amazing that you're actually at the core of human capital development, where you invest in people and their learning. Your Highness, I wanted to ask about the program that you have in SIDF. What programs would you say are the most prominent? What can you give us in terms of just a brief of some of the programs?
Sure. So as I said, it started informally in '74. Our first two CEOs were from Chase. Seconded employees from Chase to build up the fund. But what was different as well is we sent all our employees to train at back then the famous Chase credit program, but then they worked on the job with Chase. And that was an informal offering. What we've done is we said, this is recognized of SIDF, it was informal. We will formalize that as an important outcome of everything that we do. So we created SIDF Academy and then expanded its offering and reach. So now we offer our training programs not only to our employees, but over the past 3 years we've trained more than 12,000 professionals from public, private, and non-profit sectors across the kingdom.
Wow, and this is open to all
anyone.
Saudis?
Yeah, anyone within the kingdom.
Anyone, amazing. Your Highness, I want to go to another personal question. We're going to have the last 5 minutes. Unless there's a question, go ahead, please.
Yes, Your Highness.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Denis Zhirkov. I'm from Dubai company, digital company. We focus on digital transformation. We work with government, with big business company, enterprise company. And you say, our life is too short, yes? What do you think about how digital technology can boost your successful for SIDF or Saudi Arabia at all? It's first my question. And second, what do you think about how digital transformation or digital technology can boost your human development?
Thank you. I think and thank you for asking that question. So I think one of the things that we don't speak about enough in Saudi Arabia is the digital infrastructure. So I think if you compare Saudi relatively to other countries, what you would see in other places is usually the private sector leads. The private sector is well digitized. There's automation, there is use of AI, there is adoption of Industry 4.0 technologies. it's much more difficult to digitize the public sector. In Saudi Arabia, it's the flip. So across government, the digital infrastructure on relative comparison is unmatched. So I think at SIDF today, to give an example, our loan agreements are very different. Every single project has a different loan agreement that requires mortgaging certain assets. We do all that virtually. Right? In Saudi Arabia, you can go to court virtually. In Saudi Arabia, I can open an app today and show you my medical records, any title deeds of land that I own. I can transact on those, actually make transactions, buy and sell land and houses and whatsoever, virtually. And the interconnectedness of these services is just unmatched. On the flip side, the private sector lags. And I think one of the examples that we saw today, I think in one of the screens, and please go look at it, was how the kingdom was capable, because of the availability of that digital infrastructure, to respond during COVID. So on the flip of a switch, we had 400,000 students across schools enjoying e-learning programs. Similarly, we were able to respond and know and understand what's happening with people, what's happening with goods, what's happening with services, and how to activate them. And so it is massively important, and it will only grow in importance in the future. And if you think about, I mentioned ESG, right? The European Union is considering, obviously, having tariffs on carbon emissions, right? So if you think about just that problem, if you're going to actually tax carbon emissions for every product, if it's your iPad, for actually to know how to tax it, you would, for every single component there, has to be traced from all the different suppliers in the world. Where was it produced? What material? What source of energy? Right? And be capable of reporting on it. So the importance of a public digital infrastructure that can do that, but also a private, is massive. And so I think it's quite important. I think in Saudi Arabia, we have a natural competitive advantage in the public sector, where we lack, and hopefully we aspire to obviously advance. We offer specific lending programs to factories, logistics facilities to automate, where we offer long-term loans at preferable rates to do so. But that's where we're trying to advance. Sorry for the long answer.
Thank you, Your Highness. We're actually getting to an end for our session. However, I want to maybe give a closing remark. What do you think of youth leading global collaboration here at Davos? That's actually our tagline, because of the WEF collaboration in a fragmented world, and that's why we're bringing youth here. So, if you have any advice for youth.
Yeah. So I think what MISC is doing is phenomenal. As I said or alluded to earlier, I think it's refreshing. It's also energetic. Every time I come or engage with anything that is MISC related, I get a jolt of positive energy. But the focus on the S, what it means for youth, and participating not only in terms of dictating the agenda, but ensuring that you have a voice and it's being heard, and creating that global agenda is of the utmost importance. So continue to do that. I think the advice, and I've probably given quite a bit of advice today, don't listen to everything I say, but this is a point of view of one. I think engage, right? Be respectful of others as well. It will take not a single solution, but many solutions to address the challenges that we face. But I think it begins with you. And I think it's what's happening here is a testament to obviously that level of engagement, that level of participation, and that level of ambition. Remain positive, and always look for things that give you positive energy. Because a lot of our work, a lot of our daily activities, a lot of the things are a source of negative energy. But find the things that are meaningful to you in work, in your home, with your friends that give you positive energy, and surround yourself. So it's actually very important. I think that's the only advice I can give, and it's been a pleasure.
That's a very good advice. Thank you so much, Your Highness. Thank you so much for your time.
Shukran Dalal.
This is the end of our session. Thank you, everyone.
I'll stay around for a bit if
Anyone
I
has
know there were
question?
some hands raised. Happy to answer any questions.
We can take a couple of questions if anyone has any questions.
No, that's okay. We can do it.
Okay,
first.
who's your person?
Oh yeah, of course.